no party like a marketing management party, because a marketing management party don't quit. Welcome to the episode where we unlock the secrets of the universe. Today we'll be talking about where things come from and where things go. This is also known as distribution, or the P, place part of our marketing mix. The procurement or supply side of distribution is really starting with a make or buy decision to either create internally or to source externally. All organizations require some sorts of inputs. Printer paper, unless of course you're Georgia Pacific. Furniture, unless of course you're Rowe. Web services, unless of course you're Amazon or Google or some titan like that. We outsource anything that doesn't make sense for us to do internally, and usually that's quite a lot of things. The collection of activities involved in procuring stuff and distributing it out the other side is known as supply chain management. I'll represent a basic supply chain here, using 4 circles and 3 arrows. Now ideally, the 4th circle down here is your satisfied end user customer. Along the way we have things like manufacturers, leading to wholesalers and distributors, leading on to retailers. Now the 3 arrows in between represent the basic flow of product from what's called upstream to downstream, just like the normal flow of a river or a stream. In each organization, there's typically a buying and a selling function. So in essence, supply chain management is actually BS. Buying, of course, brings things into the organization. Operations is then responsible for doing something to that internally. And then sales is what pushes it out the other side. Now realize that this is an incredibly simplified supply chain. Most real-world supply chains look a whole lot like a plate of spaghetti and meatballs, where there's lots of different interconnections between different organizations and different supply chains. Products sold downstream may be returned back upstream. Competitors in a market space may buy different parts off of each other if those aren't things that they have. In the same supply chain, component parts may be sold downstream and then returned back upstream for further assembly by the final sales company. This doesn't even get into the issues of returning things back upstream, refabricating them, and then selling them back downstream. Now, marketing channels is an extension of the supply chain management concept. And this recognizes that there are other things than product simply flowing downstream or back upstream in these supply chains. It recognizes that there are things like information flows, such as information that flows back upstream from customer feedback, from orders, or from shared forecasts. Orders typically take place going back upstream, and marketing typically takes place going downstream. Though this is not always the case, we do have things called reverse marketing. And this is where buyers put out bids, what are called requests for proposals, or RFPs for short, to companies to bid on the right to supply them. We also use systems called reverse auctions that are kind of like eBay but in reverse, where a company again will put out a bid on a broader system and ask for inputs, looking for the highest quality and the lowest bid responses. Now in the old days, we used to look at each distinct layer of the supply chain as a competing force. Think Porter's 5 forces here. So there's suppliers who have power, there's buyers who have power, and you're sandwiched somewhere in between as a competing force. The goal at this time was to extract as much economic rent out of the situation as possible. However, we've come to realize that organizations in a supply chain succeed or fail together as a collection, as a unit, and that it's each organization's job to bring value to that supply chain and extract exactly the amount of economic rents out of that situation as is justified by the value that they bring to the table. This revised view of supply chain management is what we call the value chain, because it recognizes and underscores the distinct value that each organization brings to the table, but also the collective value that all of the organizations in the system have in terms of satisfying that end user's needs or end customer's needs. Organizations that fail to continually add value to the chain are disintermediated, which is just a fancy way of saying they get kicked out of the supply chain, or their activities are absorbed into another company's activities. This is often referred to as vertical integration. Now, vertical integration is when you take multiple levels of the supply chain and you put them under one organization. For example, marrying up distribution and retail. Walmart is one of the quintessential examples of this because they recognized, having started as a retailer, that they could actually do wholesaling distribution activities much better than the people that were supplying them. So they backwards vertically integrated into the wholesaling distribution aspect, which is why you now have Walmart distribution centers and Walmart retail stores. Apple's a good example of a company that has forward integrated into the supply chain. They started out primarily as a manufacturer and then opened up Apple stores later on as a retail operation. Now you can also go in both directions, which is called a balanced vertical integration, where you absorb something upstream from you and you absorb something downstream into your organization. Interestingly, as I've already sort of alluded to, it's no longer company versus company competition. It's not Apple versus HP or Walmart versus Target. It's the entire value chain of Apple versus the entire value chain of HP, or the entire value chain of Walmart versus the entire value chain of Target. And yes, there are still overlaps and interlinkages amongst their value chains. The kinds of activities that bring value to the chain are called services demanded. And these can include, but are not limited to, production, assembly, bulk breaking, forecasting, payment processing, financing, after-sales service, shipping, and more. The key to a strong value chain is to make sure that the services demanded are equal to the services supplied at each level of the supply chain. Let's look at some situations where these might or might not be the case and what the implications are. On the vertical axis, we have services supplied, and the costs of doing these things can either be aligned or they can be misaligned and too expensive. On the horizontal axis, we have services demanded. And in the top box, this is where services demanded are equal to those supplied. This is a good situation. This is where we want to be. In the bottom box of this column, however, we've got costs are too high despite the fact that they're equal. Now, this might be a good opportunity to outsource because the cost of doing what you're doing is too high, but we don't want to reduce our outputs to the customer because we're giving them exactly what they want. This is where companies employ accounting firms for audits. This is where you use payment processing services that are external to your organization. These companies do a better job and they do it more efficiently than you could possibly do it internally. And so you outsource these things to draw your costs down. For example, FedEx is going to do a way better job of shipping for most organizations than they can do for themselves. Etsy provides a market space for crafters so that they don't have to figure out individually how to go out and create a web presence for themselves. In this far left column, the services demanded are lower than what's being supplied. So think about what that means for just a second. This can mean several things. So whether your costs are aligned or not in this case, you're doing more than the customer is asking you to do. So it may be that you simply want to go find a more demanding customer segment and increase your revenue as a function of that, because you could charge them more if they're much more demanding. Because right now you have things on the table that people just don't want, which is a waste of money. If you're in the bottom column, you could seriously just simply cut out some of those extra services that you offer, and that will save you some money. Think about being IKEA for a second and them having customers assemble their own furniture, right? They've taken the assembly component out of the system and put it onto the customer, and the customers love it. So they're saving themselves money by not doing things that the customers want to be able to do. In the far right column, the services that are demanded out of the system or out of the organization are greater than what's being offered. So in other words, you're not doing enough for those customers. They want more. At the top, this isn't too bad because you may simply be able to outsource the additional things that your customers want, or you might be able to charge them more as you add those additional services that are being demanded. Now the bottom's a different story. Now, when your costs are out of whack and you're being asked to do more, this can be kind of a daunting scenario. Now, whether your costs are too high or your costs are appropriate, one solution for this might be to find and cater to a less demanding target segment. Remember how important segmenting and targeting is. That's why we talk about it so early in the course. Because if you understand the customer's needs, you'll then know what the services demanded will be across the different levels of the supply chain. This lower right-hand box here is one of the toughest positions to be in because it says that your costs are already too high and you're not doing enough. This often is where you bring in external consultants because people inside might be too married to the concepts and ideas that are already there and you need help. Let's take a few moments and chat with a friend from the beverage production and distribution industry to see how he views supply chain management and operations. Well, David Ryan, thanks so much for joining us on the show. Currently the packaging operations manager at Devil's Backbone.
My pleasure. Happy to be here.
So you've also had a number of other roles. You spent about 5.5 years at GE, and you also made things go boom as an officer in the Artillery Corps and the Army at one point. So feel
Yes,
free
sir.
as we go through to draw off of any of these experiences. It doesn't have to just be about Devil's Backbone. What we're primarily interested in hearing about is the role of operations and supply chain management and kind of its interlinkages with marketing. So you ready for the hot seat?
Sure. Let's do it.
All right, fantastic. So I'll start with a general sort of question about operations and supply chain management. So what is your view of operations and supply chain management in terms of what they do within a modern company? How do you do these things well now? And what does it look like sort of in the future for being able to continue to do them well?
I thought you said we were starting with softballs. So my view of operations supply chain management in the company is comparing operations to the black box that turns one thing into another thing. And supply chain management is kind of getting everything into the black box that it needs and getting everything out of the black box that needs to go out of the black box. So if you look at operations, inputs, output metrics, things like that, and the supply chain management aspect of it, you see in our company currently, supply chain manager is a title, and their responsibilities include procurement, logistics, scheduling, planning, things like that. And the operations team really owns the 24 hours a day of turning malt, hops, water, and yeast into packaged products that goes on a truck somewhere.
So do you have a bunch of different roles of operations managers, people that are responsible for that transfer? Obviously, the brewing, the brewmaster, would be part of that. You have a different role. There's also, as I understand it, a person that's responsible for the inbound packaging that you then put the materials into.
Yeah, so we have two different operations departments, packaging and brewing. And then the supply chain manager has a team under him that includes it's different in the different breweries, but often a procurement person, and their job is to look at the schedule, run an MRP, material resource planning, and figure out what material needs to be where at what time and get it to the operation. And then the operation takes glass, the cardboard, the beer, all these things. The supply chain managers get them synced so they arrive in a place at the same time, and then the operations kind of brings it all together and turns this level of product, aggregate separate products into this one new product. And then the supply chain management team also has the outbound logistics, and so they work very closely with the sales team to monitor demand and where everything needs to go, and distributing it, dispersing it, which is a little different than the distribution part of it, making sure it's kind of evenly dispersed where it needs to be. Did that answer the question?
Yeah. So I'm going to jump ahead, actually, since you just brought up the issue of operations and supply responding to marketing. So thinking about the outbound flow of stuff, what are some of the interesting connections that take place, issues, challenges that you run into in trying to marry up the different functions of a firm? So operations and supply management having to work with marketing and finance and human resources management and sales.
So I think some of the challenges reside in a little bit different objectives within the company. So if you take the company's objectives to do something profitably, those are usually broken up differently to different groups. So the sales group typically has the objective to grow revenue as much as possible, and the supply chain typically has the objective to shrink cost as much as possible in order to get the bottom line as big as possible. And for a salesperson to grow revenue, that means selling more beer in our company, but that may mean selling brands of beer that are not made as efficiently as other brands, or selling a large variety of beer and introducing inefficiencies to the supply chain. So a customer is in terms of connecting it to marketing and kind of knowing your market, the market as a whole is going to consist of customers that have different preferences in terms of price, value, variety, speed to delivery, things like this. And the wider you try to make the market that you serve in order to grow that top line, the more complexity you're going to introduce to the operation. And so there's really a delicate balancing act in those competing priorities of the functions. And that's something that we're actually going through right now. We've used a bit of analysis. We've hit the summer is a peak season in the beer industry. And this summer, with COVID and demand changes and supply chain restrictions and all these other things, we hit a summer where we were working 6 days a week to keep up and really trying to keep everything out the door. And some things we were not able to keep in stock to our customers, which is obviously not a positive thing anywhere on the line. And so it caused the functions and the general manager to come back together and kind of review the entire portfolio and see, maybe where can we cut back some offerings, introduce efficiencies, where can we take things that are working well and try and grow those products more specifically, and try and balance the demands of those functions.
Yeah, and you've had some really interesting products coming out, right? We've talked about this before, right? So some of the flavor palettes and whatnot at the Outpost, what you all have brewed over there has changed. One of the interesting things, right, is that Vienna Lager was sort of the staple that you all started out with, but then it got to be so high in demand that they moved that down to Williamsburg from an operations standpoint, right? Mm-hmm. Which has completely different water. And is really interesting from the standpoint of now you have to make the water in Williamsburg taste like the water in Lexington chemically to make the beer the right way, right? So that's kind of a fun thing. But so to do that, and then what were sort of the interesting implications of sort of these new flavor palettes and the I don't want to say cockamamie stuff, but the cockamamie stuff, in my view, right? In my view, as someone who likes IPAs, what were some of the implications of branching out to these different varieties and sweeter, fruitier kinds of beers?
Sure. So I think there's a couple different trends I can point to here. So first of all, a lot of the new product development that we do is really data driven. There's a ton of data that exists, both within the company, the larger AB InBev company, and that exists for beverage industry participants to subscribe to, where you can see what's selling across grocery stores, across gas stations and bars, all across the country. You can segment it by region, by type of drink, by all these kinds of things, and you can see what's growing and what's not. And obviously something that's been hot for the last, couple years has been the seltzer craze. And so one of the things that DB did in order to work in that space was introduce a brand that we call Bright. And it is it's a beer, it's an ale that is fermented incredibly dry, which in turn removes gluten from the drink. So it's I think technically not gluten free since it had gluten at one point, but it's gluten reduced to the point where it won't trigger a gluten allergy or something like that. It's also very low calorie, light and fruity flavors like a pineapple and a tangerine. But the commercial decision was made that this needed to be in the sleek cans, the tall skinny cans, instead of the regular stubby or fat beer cans, in order to promote that low calorie, not healthy, but better for you drink experience.
It's a completely different look. It's a completely different branding thing. And so it needs to stand out. When we talk about, product packaging and how important that is, thinking about Smart Water and differentiating from Deer Park or Ozarka or something like that.
Exactly. So on the operations side, though, we run one can line. And this requires a lot of mechanical changes to our can line. It takes about 8 hours of multiple people with wrenches and screwdrivers to pull out hundreds of pounds of metal from our can filler and put new parts in to make it work. And so that requires downtime on the line. It drives inefficiency. It's a big changeover, which, increases the possibility for variation in the product, whether that be, defects that we have to pull off the line or something else. And, that in turn, in order to minimize that downtime, drives us to schedule it a certain way. We try and schedule that around bottle brands that we're running, so we can do that work when we're running bottles of Gold Leaf or 8 Point or some other beer. But that in turn really restricts when you can do it, and so it restricts how quickly you can respond to changes in market demand or things like. And so that's kind of one example of a new brand that we've put out that's caused operational changes that may have not let us operate the same way with this brand as we have with other brands. And that's something that, unless you've got a very mature organization, is kind of tough to plan for, those kinds of changes that come with this and all of the ripple effects they have.
Yeah, and I mean, you're talking about one packaging line, right? So I mean, Devil's Backbone being acquired by InBev, Anheuser-Busch, more commonly known here in the States, InBev being the global conglomerate giant, whatever, that's the parent company of all this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So at the end of the day, I mean, this is really interesting because it highlights, the critical dance that takes place between marketing and operations, supply chain management. It's like, well, we want to meet the needs of the customers, right, on one hand, but to do that effectively and with the variety that they're asking for and whatnot has implications for operations, right? It creates inefficiencies for us to add variety and things like that. Now, since you brought up InBev, Anheuser-Busch, right, the transition took place, forgive me if I forget, 4 years ago, 3-4 years ago?
Probably about that. I started almost 3 years ago, and it was before I started by about a year or so.
Okay, and so this is becoming more and more common, right? So my brother-in-law, one of them, works for St. Archer, which has been acquired by Miller Coors at this point. And so these two giants are kind of going at it, buying up microbreweries and then blowing up, more regionally, for the most part, those brands. And so Devil's Backbone happened to be one of these that InBev purchased. What have been some of the changes that you've seen as a function of the brewery going from that state? I know you kind of came in after the fact, but what are some of the transitional things that have happened from it being a small microbrewery to being online purchased by a giant like InBev?
Sure. I think there's probably a lot of changes, and probably at the same time not as many as some people might think. So our product is all still controlled internally. So our founding brewmaster and his innovation brew team still brew things on our 8-barrel pilot system in Nelson County that we think we want to make. That cross-functional team of marketing and sales people and operations people and the general manager decide what we do end up making. So I think a lot of that decisional control hasn't changed, and that's something that I think the company probably got a lot of bad press for after the acquisition. But then some things have changed in ways that you may expect or think about. An example would be probably benefits. So healthcare and retirement benefits and things like that come with a big company. So that was a great thing for all the people that worked there when it was bought out, as they immediately got a better quality of life and long-term financial security and things like that. That's a lot harder to have with a small company. With that comes some of the, I don't want to say requirements, but, responsibilities or scrutiny of a big company, things around OSHA compliance and safety programs and things like that. The amount of PPE, personal protective equipment, that we wear increased after we were purchased. There's a lot more support and expertise that we can draw on from around the country. Which is a great thing when we've had issues with, equipment or a particular beer or liquid. We've been able to call up somebody who's a North American expert for this thing and travels around the country and does this stuff, and they can come help us, which is great. It's affected our distribution. So again, kind of tying it to marketing and sales and customer service. We now distribute some of our beers to Anheuser-Busch distribution centers that are our regional distribution centers. And then from there, it goes to local wholesalers and then out to customers. And so maybe where we would ship something directly and it would take 2 or 3 days, maybe now it takes a week or 2 weeks to get somewhere. So you've got a longer lead time, which in turn can introduce either a lower service level to your customer or higher inventory and higher cost in order to maintain a similar service level. So I think there have been changes kind of in a lot of different parts of the company that all kind of come together, fit together in interesting ways.
So what about in terms of scheduling as well, right? So you talked about scheduling MRP kinds of things.
Yep.
Has being part of InBev affected your scheduling and your operational efficiency at all?
It has. So again, there's still a lot of control that we have, but then there's also a lot of resources and processes that we either have access to or have to use now. So Anheuser-Busch has a planning team that plans inventory across their network, and they've got some big computer systems that work on that. And where before we worked with a private company to do kind of forecasting analytics as to what we should make, now that's in-house with Anheuser-Busch's system. And our local operations team works with their central planning team and kind of shares information and takes the plan that the model spits out and adjusts it based on things that we know are going on to try and get the best outcome for us. But we still have a lot of control in that for the past year, we've worked on a product or a project called the Product Wheel. It was actually developed by a guy at DuPont. He wrote a book on it you can buy on Amazon, but it basically runs through several analytical steps to look at the things you make and how you can group and organize and batch size those in order to get the best efficiencies out of your organization. And that was something that we kind of took and said, this is how we're going to operate now, fit the planning framework with this somehow, and let's kind of make the two work together.
So you got a Six Sigma black belt, right? So can you tell people what is Six Sigma for those that don't know what Six Sigma is? And then also, I mean, it has something to do with lean manufacturing to some extent, right? Low errors, lean manufacturing is kind of associated with that. How easy is it to operate? I mean, what is a Six Sigma black belt first and foremost? What's Six Sigma? And then, what is lean, and is it possible to get lean when you're producing beverages?
Sure. So, depending on how deep you want to go, not in this show, but in general, you can find nerds on this stuff that'll argue the details, till their dying day, I'm sure. But a lot of times you'll hear them kind of lumped together, Lean Six Sigma black belt, and you get the training on both at the same time. Lean is essentially the idea that you should remove waste from your organization. And waste is defined as anything that does not add value from a customer perspective. So if the customer would not pay you to do this thing, it's classified as waste, and you should try and minimize that in your organization. There are some interesting podcasts and articles and stuff out there. There's one called NUMMI about a car plant in California. I would encourage everyone to listen to. It's kind of interesting, but one of the points in it was that GMC tried to, I think it was GMC or one of the American-based companies tried to go into a Toyota plant and see what lean was and copy it back in the 70s or 80s, and Toyota said, "Sure, come on in. You're not gonna get it because you don't get it." And the podcast went on to say that it's not just an operations thing; it's a company mentality, and it goes back to this interaction with the different functions. Is that you have to recognize waste in the organization and try to remove it. And if you're designing waste into your products, it's going to permeate the organization, and no supply chain effort is going to be able to overcome that. A little bit of a tangent, but lean is essentially removing waste from your organization. Six Sigma is removing variation from processes. So if a non-operations example would be walking to class or driving to school or something like that. If it takes you 10 minutes from point A to point B, but sometimes it takes 8 or sometimes it takes 12, making it take 10 minutes every time, no matter what, is Six Sigma. And that has implications to lean because, one of the big wastes in lean is inventory. Carrying inventory is cash. It's things you spent money on. And if you have a lot of extra stuff laying around in order to meet customer demand quickly or something like that, it's a direct cost to the business. And a lot of times that inventory exists to cover for variability in something. So an example in the brewery business is forecasts. And this is all manufacturing, but customer order forecasts. How much do we need? And whether it's a restaurant, how many steaks are we going to sell tonight or anything, there's going to be variability in what your customer buys. And if it's more than average, you need to have inventory on hand to cover that, or else you're going to have customers that go somewhere else to buy something. And so really throughout the organization, being able to be predictable and remove variation allows you to remove waste and reduce cost, and makes for a more efficient and effective organization.
Yeah, it's a funny point about inventory. I always think about it from the accounting perspective and how, in the balance sheet, and you get charged for this by the government. So having inventory is an asset.
Yeah.
As an operations person, darn well, it's not an asset. It's a complete liability because there's perishability, there's loss, theft, yada, yada, yada.
Oh, yeah. That was when I worked for GE, that was one of the things. They have a team called an EZDI team, excess and zero demand inventory. And they just take the millions of dollars of inventory that's sitting around that you can't do anything with and find out how to repurpose it or rework it or get rid of it or something, because it's just lost money. And we had to
probably figure out how to just not have that problem and eliminate the team.
Exactly. It'd be even better.
That's what Six Sigma would say is like, you shouldn't have that problem in the first place.
Yeah. So that's a funny point. We had, we brought over once a year, we'd bring over some consultants from Japan, from the Shingi Institute, for a week. And we'd go through an exercise, and they'd walk through the warehouse and look around at the inventory piled up different places. And they say, you don't need me here. You're rich. If you can afford all this, you're good. What do you need my help for?
That's fantastic. So you alluded to COVID and this summer and some kind of changes in demands. Can you go into a little bit more detail about what the impacts of COVID have been from a production, from a demand standpoint, a sourcing standpoint? Sure.
So I'll try and remember all of it. It's hitting every part of our business, and right away, some of it not till later. Some of it's just kind of emerging, but also kind of going back to what you talked about earlier, changes coming with being acquired by Anheuser-Busch. I'll start out by saying that I think the company did a great job in responding to it from a people perspective. They were able to help get childcare benefits for people, to help pay babysitters and things like that when childcares and schools were closing, to help people be able to work and be able to, not have a bigger financial gap in order to come to work and things like that. And they were able to get masks and turn distilleries around to start making hand sanitizer. And, our distillery in Nelson County made hand sanitizer that it distributed. And so while there were, initial shortages of things, I think that company was able to turn that around faster than the populace in general. That did a couple things. It made employees, happier, healthier, more secure in their work, which is good. It's a good thing to do for your people, no matter what.
Makes them more productive too, I imagine.
Exactly. By taking that concern off the table, or some of those concerns off the table, you allow people to be at work and, keep making your product. And I think that there was some payoff of that. I didn't follow all the data, but there were definitely, for anybody that was walking through grocery stores, I think there were a lot of very noticeable shortages in, famous items like toilet paper. But if you walk through the beer aisle or the alcohol aisle, there were also shortages in certain brands and certain, formats and things like that. And Anheuser-Busch was one who I think, wasn't hit nearly as hard with that. And I think in part that at least came from, a good people focus early on. So that's kind of one aspect of it. But, the business did a lot of the traditional things, spacing things out and, walking routes and one-way things and masks for employees and temperature checks and all that kind of stuff. And with that came nobody at the site except essential personnel, including contractors and visitors and stuff. And so, we didn't have as many in-person interactions with sales teams coming through and even some of the support functions and things like that. We didn't have outside vendors coming in unless there was some critical need for it. So it was a lot less personal interaction. I think, we already had a Zoom platform and virtual meetings and stuff like that, but more of it got driven to that, and people are, finding out how to work that better. And then once again, you deal with the supply chain aspect of it. So supply chains everywhere are strapped. We've seen our lead times increase. So where we might have been able to get something in 6 weeks, now it's 8 weeks, and now it's 10 weeks. And it means planning farther ahead and less ability to react to changes. Obviously, bars and restaurants weren't open, so we weren't kegging beer. So that part of our business essentially dried up overnight. The packaging, the bottle and can side of our business increased. It's not quite enough to offset the draft demand. But those are, it's not like, you've got people with screwdrivers assembling widgets and you can just take this person and go from assembling widget A to widget B. These are dedicated machinery, and now you've got these assets sitting idle and these assets overtaxed or, at capacity or something like that, which reduces response time on those assets and is a financial drain on the other side. So there have been impacts everywhere from people to equipment to lead times of stuff to what we're selling to who's even allowed to be at the brewery. It's been something that we've put, it's also taken a lot of our time away from what would have been our normal work in a normal situation to figure out how we deal with this, just like everybody. So there's probably an opportunity cost there that's not often thought of as well.
Absolutely. Well, David, Ryan, thank you so much for spending time with us on the show. All the best for a happy and healthy 2020.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. I'm happy to be invited.
In the next episode, we're going to talk innovation and ideation so that we can build the right critical thinking mindset around the various components of the marketing mix. Until then, may the odds be ever in your favor. The procurement. No. Woo. Yeah, there's those high notes again. All right. Web services, unless you're Amazon or Google. We outsource anything. To a wholesaler or distributor. No. Distributor. Am I Canadian now? Distributor, eh? Oh, I still said it right. May buy products upstream, do something to them, then think Porter's Five Forces again here, where we've got buyer, supplier, and also to extract exactly the economic rent. Organizations that don't do value. The collective value bought. I'm glad that you wore the shirt. You got your DB shirt on there.
Yeah, haven't changed yet. Kate's still crying upstairs.
Are you gonna get some nice lighting in there?
I'm trying to. I got my little desk lamp here, but I don't know if it helps or hurts.
You want to go put some makeup on or something, or?
Is that better?
You want to get one of those circular Beyonce lights or whatever, so like a little circle in your eye?
That's a great idea. Why didn't I think of that?
I don't always stay up late at night doing video production, but when I do, I prefer Red Bull and Pop-Tarts.